the phone yet? Because I want to kind of flip to yourself as well so they know.
Okay, yeah, we're live.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Tamara Sachs and I have Phil here as well who's going to help me with this broadcast.
Hello.
The main reason we're going to do this is because I get a lot of questions from different people around the world about different topics. So what I thought to do is to try and do live broadcasts on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So we kind of, this is the first one, so welcome for those of you who are going to join us. If you have any requests on specific topics you want me to discuss, or if you prefer a different day or hours, etc., please comment below, and then we will try to accommodate everything. The reason I chose the first one to discuss eyebrows is because I feel that eyebrows is probably our most popular procedure in permanent makeup, and I think there's so many things we can discuss over that. So hopefully I'm going to give you new tips and new techniques to think about and kind of new ways to look and improve your work. So let's first start about one of the biggest misconceptions that I find. Also different techniques that I see my students, when they're working. So I have here the practice skin. And on the practice skin, here are all examples of microblading in this specific case. So for example, if you can zoom in, let's look at the first eyebrow over here. So what is wrong with the first eyebrow, okay, is the top hairs. Over here, okay, between the first hairs and the upper hairs, okay, the movement is kind of harsh. We wanna make it a little bit more harmonized, so a little bit more round. So instead of having this one straight and then this one very, very flat, okay, we probably want to create more of an arch, something like that, okay, kind of an arch between the ones that are here and the ones that will start to come from this direction. Now the second biggest error that I always find with students, especially if you're doing this type of eyebrow that has hair growth from both directions, European style, is kind of this skeleton, fish skeleton look, okay? So we really want to avoid that. And one of the ways to avoid that is that you're making the bottom ones really flat, okay? Really flat and really long ones. And then the upper ones are kind of short and curvy. Sorry, my pen doesn't work very well. And those one kind of short and curvy. So they won't ever meet. And here you're going to create different layers of hairs, okay? So that there will never be a meeting point between the upper one and the bottom one, which is very common that I see. And then another error you can see in this eyebrow is the criss crossing. So whenever, it's really important to note, whenever we work in microblading technique, we cannot cross our hair strokes. Okay, what's going to happen, you're going to create a splash of pigment right here at the meeting point, and that will just leave a stain, okay? Whenever you're working with a machine, no problem, you can cross your hair strokes. Whenever you work with microblading, you cannot cross them. Moving along to here, if you can see, the practice skin on this eyebrow is really ruptured, okay? Probably at this depth, if you're going to do a client, first of all, you're going to probably tattoo her eyebrows, okay? So they're going to last for a very long time. The hair strokes won't be crisp. They will just all smudge into one stain, okay? And the trauma to the skin, of course, it's very severe. So one of the things I'm going to show you shortly is what is the correct pressure to use with your hand, especially when you're doing microblading, because I find that microblading is a great tool, but it's very, very hard to know what is the correct depth we want to work in. We don't want it too deep and we don't want it too superficial, so nothing stays. So I'm going to demonstrate that shortly once I do the practice skin. And then one of the other things that I always find very common mistake is the tail. So what we want to create, and I did this mistake very often myself as well, we want to bring up the tail as much as we can. So let's say if you imagine that this is a notebook that has lines. Then the beginning of the eyebrow should ideally sit on the first line, and then the tail should be on the third line, because we want to give an effect of eye lifting, especially since most of our customers are probably in the age that they really want to have an eye lift kind of effect. So it's really important to make the tail upper. A lot of times I see the tail probably a little bit too long and a little bit too downwards, like I'm showing you now, and that's kind of going to create a look of falling eyelid, as well as kind of a little bit more severe, kind of angry look. So make sure to always make your tail upper one, okay? And also make sure it's not too long, meaning you want to have a 45-degree angle between the tip of the nose and where the tail is. Okay, so you want to have a 45-degree over there. Now, about the hair strokes. So one of my biggest tips is that I always think we have a hand memory. So what do I mean by that? So the way I normally like to work, first of all, I normally sit on the side of the client just like I am right now, okay? The client normally lies down here, facing here, and I either work from this side on both eyebrows or I tilt myself to each side while working. Now, the way I work, okay, I pre-numb the skin. I prefer that my clients are very comfortable during the procedure, even on the first pass. So I normally numb them. And then what I like to do is to simultaneously work at the same time on both eyebrows. And the reason being is because I want my hand to be able to memorize what I did on this side and then move to this side before it's too long. What do I mean? So now this is the eyebrows I want to work on. So I pre-numbed it. I clean my pre-numbing, okay? And then I start working. So first I do long hair strokes with really big gaps between them along the frame of the eyebrow. So the main thing that's important to me in this case is the frame. I don't want to lose the frame. And then in the front, I'll just do a small one here and a small one here so I don't lose the front. And then I'll put a open skin numbing, okay? And I'll move to the next eyebrow, and I'm going to repeat the exact same thing over here. So first, long ones along the structure of the eyebrow, and then the upper ones. And then the front. Then I come back to this side and I start to do this, what I called second layer of the eyebrow. What I mean, one of the biggest errors that I also find is that people like to work very tidy, and therefore they're making the strokes all coming out from the same point. Now what happens is it looks very, very tidy and very beautiful. However, after healed, this will all smudge and it will be like a very soft, powdery look. If you're trying to achieve a more natural, realistic look of an eyebrow, you have to remember that follicles don't all come out from the same spot. You have to play with the different heights of where they're coming from. So the way I do that, between each stroke I made, I'm going to make a middle one, but I'm not going to start it from the same base point as the first one did. I'm going to take it a little bit upward, and this stroke is also going to be a little bit more flat. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing from the upper ones. I'm going to make a stroke that's not on the same line as the upper ones, a little bit to the back and facing the tail. And then I'm going to come to the front and I'm going to work a little bit more in the front, adding a little bit more strokes here. Now also remember, the front is supposed to be the least dense area of the eyebrow. Okay, so you should probably leave about this much of a gap in the front that you're going to leave with bigger distances, whereas this area of the eyebrow, which is the middle one, is going to be the most dense part of your eyebrow. So like I said, I am going to renumb this eyebrow with an open skin numbing cream, numbing solution, and then I'm going to move to this one and I'm going to repeat the same philosophy as I did in the first one, and I'm going to do it from the upper one as well. Okay, and I'm going to put a few more in the front. And now I'm coming to my third round on each eyebrow. So here I'm going to make really flat ones. Okay, I'm repeating them so you can see them more clearly. They're all facing the tail. They're really dense. I would sometimes also use a darker color for that area, and then I'm going to add a little bit more here as well. And then from this point onward, it's just kind of improving the existing strokes I have. So repeating the ones I wanted more noticeable, adding a little bit more depth. But that's pretty much how it should look like. And like I said, I think a really realistic eyebrow should not all follicles start from the same point. They should be starting from different points. And now I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to create the dense part of the eyebrow, which is very, very flat. Strokes from both directions, facing the tail. Now, one thing you need to note in this technique, if you're doing it with a machine, you can cross the hairs. Okay, you can do something like this. If not, you cannot. You have to make sure your hairs are meeting each other, but they're not crossing each other. And again, I'm just going to repeat the ones I want to be more noticeable. So that's pretty much the way I would normally work when I'm doing an eyebrows. And another sleek thing that I wanted to show you before I'm going to do the practice skin presentation. There is knives like this. This is a one-time use ones. There is also machine ones if you prefer. And the way they work is whenever you want to clean the customers, you can kind of, it's really neat, it's really nice knife. You just have to stretch the skin and kind of push it a little bit downward. So they're really convenient. This is a more simple one. There's also machine ones, and it's kind of a really neat way to clean the hairs that we don't want. And now, if there's no questions, I'm going to show you different ways on how to do eyebrows. I'm going to show different needles, and then I'm going to show microblading as well. So the first.
Hang on a second. Hi Barbara, thanks very much for leaving a comment. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask, feel free to leave them in the comments. And after the demonstration, Tamara will answer as many as questions as possible. But for now, let's go back to the demonstration.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay. So always make sure to mix really well your pigments. Now this is a pigment that's suited for machine. Okay, so it's a little bit more runny than microblading. I'm just going to show you on the practice skin so you kind of understand the differences. So microblading pigments are basically the exact same thing. They're just a little bit more rich in glycerine. So if you can see, this one is a little bit thicker. Okay, you can see this one is running down and the other one is completely dry because it's so full of glycerin. Now the reason you need to note this is before I had the microblading pigments, I used to use this ones with the microblading. It works as well. The only thing is you want to have a little bit more glycerin so it's kind of holding better on the blade. Okay, so you don't have it dropping down. And the second thing is, it depends on the client's skin. If we're going to do an eyebrows to a more dry skin, then we prefer to use glycerin-based pigment, which is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of doing microblading on a dry skin. So for my older clientele that normally have a dry skin, I prefer to use that microblading technique. Whereas an oily skin, or someone like me, for example, glycerin won't work very well. I actually tested on myself. It doesn't, the retention is pretty bad. So you would rather work with pigment that contains a little bit more water. So water corresponds better with an oily skin, which is also one of the reasons why I think machine eyebrows are a little bit more suited for oily skin than microblading does. So I have here a pigment called Acapulco. It's a really nice one. I'm going to first demonstrate 0.17 needle. So it's the thinnest there is in the market. It creates really, you can see the needle. It's a long taper needle, really thin. creates really, really nice soft lines. The only thing I like to explain is that people think that the thinner needle is better, and it's not always necessarily that way, because if you're going to not work with it properly and then you're going to have to repeat the line over and over again, then basically you're going to create a really thick line. So you might as well take a bit thicker needle. But I'm going to show you guys the 0.17. So I normally like to work at about 140 speed. I like to work at a 0.5 depth. And the way I always say to know what depth you're in is that the first point where you still don't see any needle coming out of the machine, so it's this point, okay? Every turn from this moment onward is about 0.1 millimeter depth. So I'm going to turn it 5 times. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's about 1.5, okay? Now I'm not going to work all the way to the plastic. I'm just going to come in about halfway with the needle. Now the way it can work, you give a good stretch to the skin from both ways. So my pinky is stretching downward, and over here I'm stretching with my 2 fingers. And you can either work from this direction very slowly, or you can work from the other direction, so from inward upward. And as you can see, I'm doing the same pattern that I showed you guys with the pen. So I'm first doing long strokes with big gaps. And like I said, you can also work from this direction if you prefer. And now I'm going to move to the next eyebrow if it's a client, and now I'm coming back to this one after numbing it, and I'm going to do the second layer. So it's going to start from the middle of the hair right onto the hair. And now I'm going to come back to my third layer, which is the dense part of the middle of the eyebrow, and it's really, really flat.
How do you know how much pressure to apply?
So we don't want the client to bleed. If she's bleeding, it probably means we went too deep. So if she has little spots of blood where we work, that's probably sufficient. No need for more pressure than that. You also have to take into consideration the age of the client. The older we get, we kind of lose the epidermis layer. It becomes really, really thin. So if I'm going to apply a lot of pressure on an older skin, I'm just going to rupture it and penetrate very deep. So I would probably work very, very superficial on someone like that. Okay. Now, this is the mineral oil. Not a lot of people are familiar with that. It's really good to wipe away pigment, as well as kind of smooth the skin for the treatment and open it better. So it's really good to clean up with the mineral oil while you're working and kind of prepare the skin really, really well. Okay, so now I pretty much have my eyebrow. Now I'm just going to tweak it and add where I feel is necessary. So I'm just going to repeat the existing lines. And remember, in the middle I want a little bit more density. So it's okay to make my lines more noticeable over there. And very, very dense. Another thing I want to mention is I find a lot of people like to wipe with baby wipes. That's probably the worst. First of all, a lot of people are allergic to some of the preservatives that baby wipes have, like myself. So you're going to probably have an allergic reaction from it. Second of all, it contains a lot of soap, and that soap is attacking your pigment, so your retention is going to be less than ideal. Now, the one crucial thing is to make sure that, unless you want to add lines because you feel that they're too far apart, you want to make sure that you're really repeating the same lines you did the first time, and that's probably the biggest challenge in doing hair stroke technique.
How many times do you need to go over each line?
It really depends. Until I see that it's, I feel it's enough pigment deposit in, and I think it's enough and it's going to last even after healing. So it's a very intuitive feeling. Now, if you want, you can add even more depth to the mauve dense part, and you can do a little bit ombre, which is now very popular. So maybe take one more good look of probably how dense I would do it if it's a hair stroke. Okay, and now if I do want to make ombre, I would probably go from the middle, in between the lines. So, Donna, if you happen to be with us, this is for you. You've asked me that. So you want to kind of add a little bit of shading between the lines. But as you can see, I'm not going all the way to the very front of the eyebrow. So we're here again. Okay, so now you can see I've kind of added a little bit of ombre shadow between it. So that's kind of if you really want to get high definition of an eyebrow. So it all depends on the client. Now, the second thing I'm going to show you with the 0.17 that you can do is the Stardust eyebrow. So you want to first start beginning of an eyebrow, a little bit of fast dotting, and then you can start doing kind of back and forth movements. And with Stardust, you want to use as much as you can the pigment you have before you reheat the needle. And then you start filling in, so you want to have more pigment. And of course it's all about the speed as well. If you're working very fast, you're not depositing a lot of pigment in the areas you're working on. If you work So here's the two effects. Maybe if you can show it from above, they can have a better. So the upper one is hair strokes that I've added a little bit of shadow to it. Come from here maybe, yeah. And then the second eyebrow is Stardust eyebrow. Okay. And now I'm going to show you microblading. So this is my pen. It's autoclavable, which is why I really like it. And I've put aside two needles. One is 14 curved and one is 14 U-shape. And I'm going to show you how to work with that. So this is how I put in the needle. I close it in. I normally like that the longer part is going to face outward. Okay, so it's kind of in an angle. Okay, so this is facing outward. Now, the way I like to work with microblading, and like I said, if you're seeing a lot of bleeding when you're doing microblading, it probably means you're a little bit too aggressive, and you should kind of relieve your hand a little bit. So I'm going to follow the exact same philosophy as when I work with a machine. I'm going to dip the edge of my needle. Okay, I'm going to give a good stretch, and then I'm going to do the first strokes. So all the needles are touching the skin, and when it's microblading, it's, if you can see, it's this, there you go, it's this two fingers that are really working hard. So you kind of, to curve the hair, you really want these two fingers to help you out. So, and I probably dip my needle after each and every stroke. And you have to make sure, people think that with microblading you can't shade an area. Of course you can, if you're going to do the strokes very dense, or if you're going to hold the blade in an angle, your pigment is going to come from beneath as well, and you won't see as many strokes. So now I'm doing my upper ones. As you can see, they're very far apart from the bottom one, so I'm not getting the skeleton look. And now I'm going to do the front one. Now, I like to do everything with one needle, and you could. It's all a matter of practice. So if you want to really make small hairs, it's just a matter of either holding the microblade in a way that just the long ones are touching the skin, so you kind of make smaller hairs. Okay? But everything is possible. So now after I did my first one, I'm just going to add a little bit more pigments. I'm going to do the second layer. So again, from the middle of the first one, try and dip after each and every stroke. Okay, and of course we're doing now microblade, so you have to be really, really careful not to cross hairs. So they can meet each other, but they cannot cross. So now I'm going to do my third layer, which is very, very flat and long strokes. Okay, and toward the front, remember we don't want to over dance the front. So I'm just going to add a little bit more strokes here. And again, really make sure that you're not crossing anything. Now I'm going to wipe it. Okay, so here's my eyebrow. And at this point I'm going to add where I left a little bit of gaps, and I'm going to repeat the same lines I have very, very gently. So now please look carefully. So here, for instance, I left a big gap, so I'm going to add more stroke here. Here I want another one, probably here in the little parts. And now I'm going to repeat the ones that I want to have a little bit strong definition. Now, when you do it with the microblading, you want to make sure you're really on the same area you opened up. And in a way, it's a little bit easier to do than when you're repeating a line with a machine, because you can really feel the hole that you created in the skin. Of course, on the practice skin, you really feel it, but also on the client. You can feel the hole. So you can see I'm repeating the exact same ones gently, kind of opening them up and adding a little bit more pigment to them so they're more noticeable. Now, as you can see, I'm not a big fan of very dense hair strokes, because I know that after healed, a lot of them migrate a little bit to some extent. So I prefer to still have a very natural look than to have a more powder look, because some of my lines migrate to each other. But that's a really personal perspective. Here also in home. Okay. So this is pretty much my final look. Again, you can see I'm a big fan of both directions hairs. In future broadcasts, I will also show other types of technique, because it also really depends on the hair growth of your clients. Not everyone have the growth like that, but that's a very popular way to have the hairs done. Okay. And again, you can leave it at that, or if you want to add shadow to it. I personally don't like to use the pen for shadowing. I think it ruptures the skin a lot, and since you already opened the skin, you're kind of really tearing it apart. So if you do want to add shadow between your microblade strokes, then you can do so with a machine. That's how I like to do it, and it's just the same as I showed here. You would just go in the gaps, very fast movements in the gaps between, to kind of give it a little bit more definition. In my hybrid technique class, I also teach that what you can do, you can create hair strokes with a machine. Hair strokes of machine will heal a little bit differently than the hair stroke of the microblade, so you can also do that, and then after healed you will kind of have a more 3D look. So again, you can either do hair strokes between where you want to have a little bit more 3D, or you can do a little bit of But either way, like I said, I personally prefer doing it with a machine. I don't like the pen for that. The manual pen for shading. Okay. So, the last demonstration I'm going to do today is the U-needle, because it's a little bit different than the one I just showed, the curve. Some like the curve better, some like the U-shape. The only thing I like to mention is that if you're using the U-shape, there's two ways you can do it. I'll show you. You can either use just the middle part, and then it will be just this kind of movements, okay? Or you can utilize all of it, so you're kind of working in a U shape as well. So you're beginning the stroke with the the end of the needle, and then the thicker part, the middle part of the stroke, you're going to do with the longer ones, and then you're going to end with the other short needles from the other side. So it's kind of, you can either work like this, kind of opening slowly the skin, okay, or you can work like this. In this specific case, I do long ones, but you probably work with shorter ones. Okay, so I'm going to do another eyebrow with the U shape. I'm going to do a flat eyebrow so you guys can have a little bit variety. So flat one is what I normally call the Asian look. It's very popular there. So first thing that's different is that all the strokes from the half of the eyebrow will be downward facing. So it will be like this. So it's just downward facing all the way through. Like I said, you can work with it like this, or if I'm going to do the small hairs in the front, I'm going to work with it like this. Now in the Asian style, the bottom ones are really flat, and then most of the hairs are coming from this direction. Like I said, this is a 14U needle. Most of my beginner students with microblading don't like this one as much. I guess you have to try both to kind of decide what you prefer. Wipe. What is also, by the way, really good with using white pencil is, as you can see, it's a little bit more thicker to remove from the skin, so it normally leaves a better kind of border to our work. And now I'm just going to, like I did before, I'm going to repeat the existing strokes I did, and I'm going to add a little bit more to the spaces I left. And like I said, with the U, what's really nice is that for the small ones, it's really nice needle to use if you really want to have a lot of small hairs in between. It's very convenient. And I'm going to gently repeat the ones I already did. So I'm just finishing up. I normally work about 2 times on each stroke when I'm doing microblading, not more than that. I don't want to over traumatize the skin. So you can kind of see the difference between one that I repeat and one I didn't. Here, for example, it's kind of look a little bit empty because the stroke there wasn't repeated. So that's exactly why we're doing this. Okay, so here you have it. So this was 0.17 with Acapulco pigment. We also added a little bit of shadow with the 0.17 in between. This is an ombre stardust eyebrow, also done with the 0.17. This is a microblade Asian style eyebrow done with the U-shape needle. And then here is the microblade European style done with the 13 curved. And this is it. This is the end of our broadcast today. You're welcome to visit my Facebook page for if you have any questions. You're welcome to comment even if you didn't watch us live. We will try to respond for everything. And my next upcoming class, the next one is going to be in Santiago, Chile from the 22nd to the 25th of October. Then I'm going to have a class in New York, beginning of November. I'm going to have a class in California right after that, beginning of November. And then I'm going to be in San Francisco. So you're welcome to send me any questions or emails or anything if you want to have more information. Thank you very much and looking forward to the next podcast.